Good evening, everyone. I, Dr. Ujjal Jeet, uh, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Guru Nanak Dev University, on behalf of the Literary Club of our university, uh, welcome you all to today's very special event, that is the celebration of Mother Language Day. So back in 1929, Edward Sapir and his associate Benjamin Lee Whorf, they asserted that our native language not only expresses our reality but also constitutes it. So, in other words, we may say that our language provides us with the experiential gaze to make sense of the world around us. In still simpler terms, we may say that language and identity are intricately related, and we build our communities around our linguistic knowledge and linguistic experience. So, this is the reason that Punjabi speaking people are called Punjabis, French speaking people are called French, and German speaking people are called German, and so on. But unfortunately, due to number of reasons which may be ethnological, sociological, commercial, political, or maybe socio-political, the minority languages are subsumed by the majority languages. This not only leads to the death of the language, but also death of the community. So this presents a very important concern of linguistic diversities and the ancestral knowledge systems. So, a very important step towards protecting, preserving, and revitalizing lesser known languages is through their script documentation. So, today we take this occasion to discuss this very important but relatively less discussed subject of minority orthographies and alphabet revitalization. And for this, we have a very special guest, Mr. Tim Brookes, an internationally acclaimed name in this field. And along with his linguistic work, he is also involved in a number of other things. He's a guitarist, he is a soccer player, he does wood carvings of endangered alphabets, and so on. So, without delaying any further, we start the program, and I surrender the floor to my associate today for this program, Miss Jasmine Kaur. Jasmine, please.
Thank you. So, first of all, good evening, everyone. I, Jasmine Kaur, student of Mass Communication in Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, would like to greet you all on International Mother Language Day. International Mother Language Day is a worldwide annual observance held on 21st February to promote awareness of linguistic and cultural diversity and to promote multilingualism. First announced by UNESCO on 17 November 1999. The idea to celebrate International Mother Language Day was the initiative of Bangladesh. 21 Feb is the anniversary of the day when the people of Bangladesh fought for the recognition for the Bengali language. Today, on International Mother Language Day, the Literary Club of GNDU is going to conduct a seminar, and in this seminar, we have a very special guest, Mr. Tim Brookes. I would like to introduce you all to our guest of the day, who is the president of the Endangered Alphabets Project, Mr. Tim Brookes, an editor, guitarist, teacher, soccer coach, commentator, and author of 17 books. He founded this project in 2010. Mr. Brookes was born in England and educated at Oxford before moving to the United States in 1980. He is universally regarded as the pioneer and authority in the field of script loss and revitalization on a global scale. He is a frequent speaker presenter at various conferences on endangered languages. Since the beginning of this project, with his first exhibition of carvings in indigenous and minority scripts, He has exhibited and spoken about the endangered alphabets at more than 150 colleges, universities, and various other institutions, including Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, the Smithsonian Institution, and the Library of Congress. He has been working with a wide range of cultures to create games and educational material for learning minority scripts. He has also been published in the New York Times Magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, National Geographic, and dozens of other publications. So many years into the project, the endangered alphabets have been displayed and discussed across the world and now are embedded in the Atlas of Endangered Alphabets at www.endangeredalphabets.net.
I've never done before, because I'm recognizing there are some very interesting generational issues in this subject, and I'll explain that as I go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to talk about my subject, endangered alphabets, in two different areas. As if I were talking to two different generations of audience, because I recognize that many of, if not most of you, are students, and I would like to be able to speak to interests of yours as well as those of your professors. And so what I'm going to be doing is talking about two different related aspects of this. The first one is traditional scripts or writing systems that for various reasons have been forced into decline or even almost out of use altogether. And I say forced because it's never a choice. But I'm also going to be talking about new writing systems that have been created relatively recently, usually by an individual, usually by a young individual, sometimes by an amazingly young individual, as you'll see, because that person feels that their community needs their own writing system, precisely as you were just hearing, as a means of creating a visual dimension to their own linguistic identity. One of the most remarkable things about writing is that because it can be seen, it acts not only as a medium of communication, but also as a kind of visual iconography, like a flag or the head on a coin, which stands for a culture in ways that go beyond the simply linguistic. We'll get to that in just a minute. So if I can remember how to screen share on Google Meets, which I don't use that often. Wait a second, I'm looking for screen sharing here. Captions, raise hand. We don't want to do any of those. Where's screen sharing? More options. Wait a second. Wait a second. Someone help me out here. Google Meets. How do you share the screen?
Gaurav, can you help Mr. Brookes?
नो मैम, उसी तरफ से होगा, मतलब
कहाँ से?
उनके
जो three
खुद के
dots
पीछे
है? 3 dots?
3 dots. So at the 3 dots, whiteboard, change layout.
There
there
must
is a
be an
button.
option
There
of
is a
screen
button
share.
of screen share, मतलब नीचे.
कहाँ पे?
Oh, you know what? You need to make me a co-host.
Present now.
To make you a co-host. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That enables me to share the screen.
Okay, right. I'll just do it. Yes.
I wish I... Okay, I am now a co-host. Great. In that case, I should be able to... I should be able to now share the screen. As I say, I'm used to doing this in Zoom. I'm less used to doing it in Google Meets. Huh.
I personally believe that everyone who does not use technology very well is actually an artist.
I hope not to have to use that excuse. As I say, I do this all the time, but I'm okay. We've got a bunch of people who are joining us, which is nice. But why am I not getting a share screen option?
Gaurav is the technical help. I wonder if he can help us.
Ma'am, there is a button with arrow, matlab up.
Button with arrow. Okay. And where is this button? Yes, Gaurav, are you here?
Ma'am, at the end bottom of the screen, there are 3 dots. When we click, there are a lot of options like in call messages, screen share, show captions. If Tim can find that.
Right. I've tried that, and there's no share screen option there.
That's strange.
It's possible that because you made me a co-host while the talk was already in progress, it's not offering me that option now. Hang on just one second.
Okay, so this one, Tim.
Yes.
So this is there is under your screen near the red call button. So there are 3 dots, and with the 3 dots there is present now.
I'm not seeing.
There is an arrow pointing upwards. With the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen.
Just one second. I think I'm getting there. I think I just need to do this a different way.
I'm sending you a picture on your WhatsApp also. Probably that can help.
Sorry to do this to you, everybody. I think I've got there.
Okay.
Oh, it says Google Chrome may not have screen recording permission on your computer. Go to System Preferences. This is getting really annoying. Okay, just one second.
Pitambar, you are here. Can you speak and tell Tim what to be done?
What Tim problem is facing, what we can do is you just send your mail and then you can share on your behalf.
Okay, so Tim, you send me
the
file, and me and Gaurav, we will share your slides.
That sounds fine. Okay, I'll send them to you by email right now. And then that also means I can start talking. I actually really like talking rather than doing emails anyway.
If suppose your talk can be done without a presentation, it's perfectly fine for us.
Okay, give me 1 second and we will get this off to you, and then I'll start doing the talk, and then when it's up and loaded, then we will rock and roll. Okay, It's attached. It's coming in as an attachment, and I'm going to send it out as soon as it's loaded. Okay. I've just emailed it to you, and I'm going to go back. All right. So I'm going to start my talk. And when the PowerPoint arrives, if you can load it, and then we can get going. All right, everybody, I'm so sorry for this technical glitch. I'm sure we'll get it going as quickly as we can. Okay, so the Endangered Alphabets project began about 12 years ago, and it began in strange circumstances. As you've already heard in that very generous introduction, I am not a professional or academic linguist or an anthropologist, and nor am I an artist or woodcarver, but sort of by accident, I started discovering how many interesting and beautiful writing systems or scripts there are in the world. And for reasons that we don't need to go into just now, I thought I might carve them in wood. And this really began as a hobby. And I'll show you the kind of thing that I'm talking about right now. So I'm going to hold this up to the camera, and I may have to sit back just a little bit so you can see. So this is this extraordinarily beautiful symbol here is actually from an extinct alphabet. That is from the Pallava script, which sort of developed into a wide variety of scripts throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia. And one of the things that I find just so lovely about it is that because it evolved in an era before printing, it's not sequential. It's not a series of lines of symbols. The symbols actually combine into that kind of graphic element. And so in the articulation of a letter or a word is the concept of beauty, as opposed to simply the notion that an individual symbol represents an individual sound, a kind of atomization or breakdown of the whole notion of language. Here is an even more interesting one. It's one that doesn't really capture the extraordinary quality of the original, and I'll explain why in a second. So this is actually sort of the final version of a sand drawing from Vanuatu in the Pacific. And these are not symbols that represent sounds or words. These are actually a form of performance or storytelling. So what happens is the storyteller has a particular story in mind to tell. And often these are mythical stories or educational stories or life lessons. And what the storyteller does is to tell the story while tracing the design in sand. And so the sand becomes the medium, and the movement of the finger literally is the storyline. And so it's an extraordinary thing. You can see videos of this on YouTube. It's absolutely mesmerizing because instead of it being a static and finished product, which is how we tend to think of writing, it's an act. If there's one thing that has changed in me as I've been working on the Endangered Alphabets over these 12 years, is that my notion of what writing is has changed and expanded extraordinarily. So as the storyteller is telling the story and creating this amazing kind of weaving in and out never going over the same line twice, although often crossing the lines, so that in places you've actually got a line that's like 3 deep in the sand. And the end of the story coincides with the completion of the picture. And so you have this amazing unification of words and pictures, which we think of as being 2 different things, but here they're absolutely part of the same thing and part of the same performance. And the other really interesting thing about this is that because, again, this is a culture whose notion of writing has not been influenced by printing, there isn't the idea that writing should be something permanent, or writing should be something that can be industrially reproduced. And instead, it's a performance, and then when it's finished, it blows away, or it gets washed away. It's actually very similar. When I was in southern India, and I'm sure you've seen similar things here, I saw the women making kolam, the designs outside the front of their houses with, powdered chalk or with dust. Very, very interesting, intricate patterns, just beautiful. And then, of course, by the end of the day, they're gone. And the following day is a new pattern. So in that one in particular, in the Vanuatu sand writing or sand drawing, you have this extraordinary combination of all of these different elements that really take our notion of writing and expand it in all kinds of different ways. Do we have the PowerPoint ready?
Yes, that's ready. Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
So would you like to share them now?
Yes, fire it up, and we'll go through the PowerPoint, and I'll just say next slide, please, when we're ready to move on.
Okay. So Gaurav, are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's start sharing the slides.
Thanks, Gaurav.
And when he says the next slide, just move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as introduction, just while Gaurav is getting this up and running, here we go. So what fascinated me right away when your professor first contacted me was that you are in the Punjab. And yeah, let's go to the second slide, if you don't mind, Gaurav. And because I had already heard in my research that in the Punjab there are there's a number of scripts that are highly endangered, and they're very, very interesting scripts. And again, this is the journey that the Endangered Alphabets has taken me on, because we don't have anything like this in Europe or in the US at all. So these are scripts. They're of a family of scripts called Landa scripts. At least 10 ancient scripts were classified as Landa scripts. They were often used as the mercantile scripts of the Punjab region. So straight away, this is really interesting, the notion that you have a form of writing that has a particular purpose. We sort of understand this in terms of shorthand. There are various kinds of shorthand that are used by individual professions, but these are scripts that were used for banking purposes and for correspondence, as you'll see. And I also want to talk about, I just want to read this slide. I mean, it's stupid to read a slide when we could be talking to each other, but there's some really interesting things here. So as you see, Gurmukhi is used for Punjabi and sometimes Sindhi, developed from Landa, and is the only major Landa script in modern day usage. So one of the things that's most interesting to me is that once a script begins to fall away from everyday usage, it gets dismissed. If you Google world's most popular writing systems, you'll find tons and tons and tons of sites who are going to give you information about, you know, the top 10 or the top 5 or whatever. If you Google the world's most endangered writing systems, you get one hit, and that is me, the Endangered Alphabets Project. And that's a very interesting notion. And it's based on the belief that the important stuff to study and to consider is the stuff with the big numbers. And I am delighted to hear in the introduction your professor talking about the fact that, no, we now start seeing things differently, that we're starting to recognize that, one, diversity of all kinds is vital, and two, there is such a strong connection between a language or a script and its culture, that to diss the language or the script is to diss the culture and to damage the culture and to erode the culture and its sense of dignity and self-respect. So as much as anything, endangered languages and endangered alphabets are about human rights, which is, of course, really important for International Mother Language Day, and social justice, but also a sort of an equal relationship in terms of dignity and respect. And so what it says on this very official sounding slide, which I got from a very official source, is that the next 4 scripts, Hotki, Hudabadi, Mahajani, and Multani, are not in modern day usage, whereas in fact we know they are. They're just used by a very small number of people. And my job is to find those people, to find out who is still using it and what for, and if possible, to support them. And Gaurav, can we have the next slide, please? So let's have a look at a couple of these scripts and why they're worth why they're worth our attention and our respect. So Mahajani, there's an example of the script, and here is an outsider, probably a Brit, writing about it, and being a Brit, of course, he's talking condescendingly. Honestly, the Brits are terrible. Seriously, just slap them whenever you get a chance. But this is what he says. The Mahajani character differs entirely from that used for general purposes of correspondence and is quite unintelligible to any but commercial men. It is in its origin as irregular and scrawling as the Sindhi, but has been reduced by men of business into a neat-looking system of little round letters, in which, however, the original Devanagari type has become so effaced as to hardly be recognizable even when pointed out. Perhaps this is intentional. Secrecy has always been an important consideration with native merchants, and it's probable that they purposely made their peculiar alphabet, honestly, peculiar alphabet. Don't you want to slap him? As unlike anything else as possible, in order that they alone might have the key to it. So this is something very interesting about a minority script or an endangered script. It becomes a kind of code because only the people who use it can read it and understand it. And obviously, in terms of business, that becomes very, very important because you don't necessarily want people to be able to read your documents and gather information from them. And this becomes even more true with the next script. Gaurav, can you move to the next slide, please? So Hudabadi, which is, I think, the only script I know that's named after a town, because it was first originally used apparently in the town of Hudabad. Anyway, so this is another of these commercial scripts. In the second paragraph, it says, At first, Hudabadi was used by Sindhis living in Hudabad to send written messages to relatives back in their hometowns. Due to its simplicity, the use of this script spread quickly, and Sindhi traders and merchants started keeping their accounts and other business documents in the new script to keep them secret from competitors, foreigners, and officials, especially overseas. And so this became a script that was used particularly for letters. So if you're sending documents and letters to business connections or family some distance away, you know, 100 years ago, there was every possibility those letters might be intercepted. So the idea of being able to have your own script is a very smart one. But it also means something else in the field of endangerment. And that is that almost nobody has done any serious study in what exactly is the impact when a culture's script is no longer used. What exactly is lost? And we know that from all too many examples, that what is lost is a sense of separate identity, a sense of history, a sense. I just received a letter from a young woman in Indonesia whose father was a heroic soldier in the fight for independence after World War II in Indonesia. And he's left his letters and documents, but she can't read them because they were in the Javanese script. And when Indonesia achieved independence, it started using the Latin or Roman alphabet. And so she has literally, she's lost her father. But here in these mercantile scripts, there's something else, which is it's very possible you may lose your fortune, or you may lose your claim to a fortune because it may have been written in these documents, in this script that you can't read anymore. You just have no idea what's there. So a script is really, really tied in with not only who we as a community are, but who each individual is in relation to their family, their community, their past. So that is the area of endangered traditional scripts. But now I want to sort of move it forward in time, up to date. And Gaurav, can we have the next slide, please? And I want to talk about newly created, or as I'm calling them, custom scripts of South Asia. And here are some examples. And I'm not going to tell you what they are. If you like, as a class exercise, you can have the students figure out which language these scripts have been created to represent. Okay, next slide. So, as part of this big project that we're working on, this 3-year project to create a catalog of all of the scripts currently in use anywhere in the world, one of the things that I started doing was to sort of pull out scripts that have been created new, individually, not ones that have been inherited through the movement of a religion or an army or a colonial authority or through business, through commerce and trade, but ones that somebody invented for their community. And there are a remarkable number of these. Fully half of all of the scripts we've identified as being in use or possibly in use today have been created by an individual. And yet these scripts and this whole process of script creation is massively understudied and under-respected. And it's of particular interest to people in South Asia because South Asia has become the epicenter of script creation in the world. And I started putting these numbers together. This is a chart that I put together about 9 months ago, and it's already out of date. So what you'll see is that I've identified 4 areas across the top: Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and anywhere else in the world. And then I've got 3 time or 2 time brackets and a total before 1950, since 1950. So if you look across the top row before 1950, what you'll see is that Africa was the epicenter of script creation, especially West Africa, where an extraordinary number of scripts have been created. And at the time, before 1950, if you look at South Asia, the number was considerably smaller. If you go down to the next line, since 1950, the number in Africa has gone up, but the number in South Asia has gone up dramatically. And as I say, since I put these numbers together, we have heard of at least 4 or 5 new scripts that either hadn't been created or we hadn't heard about before that point. So in South Asia alone, at least 50 scripts have been created in the last, shall we say, 70 to 75 years. Next slide, please. And you would think this is something that would be really closely studied, but it isn't. So I'm going to not go through each of these one by one, but as this is being recorded, and as you now have my slide deck anyway, this is something you can go over them. So these are a list of custom-made scripts in South Asia. And again, this is not complete. We've discovered more since then. So can you just skip kind of quickly through these 3 slides, Gaurav, which just to show what we are. So we have A to G on this slide. On the next slide, we have another bunch, H to K. You'll notice, by the way, a number of these, about 20, have been created by a professor at Andhra University in Andhra Pradesh called Dr. Prasanna Shri, who specializes in going to minority communities and creating writing systems for them, obviously with their input. Next slide. We still haven't finished. M going down through S. Yeah, some of these are up in Nepal, where there's a fair amount of script creation, but most of them are in India, and most of them are in eastern and northeastern India. Next slide. There we go. We have pretty much got to the end of my list now, although, as I say, it is by no means complete. Okay, next slide. So, as I said, you would think that this phenomenon is so interesting and so vital in an era of diversity and the recognition of the importance of diversity, that that this would be widely studied, especially by linguists. And it turns out that that is not the case. Next slide. So one of my heroes is an Australian anthropologist called Piers Kelly. And interestingly enough, anthropologists are much more interested in new scripts than linguists. Anthropologists, I think quite rightly, see a script as being a contextual thing, something whose identity and life is inextricable from its community and all the aspects and features of its community. The two can't be separated any more than you could separate, say, a community and its forms of dance or its forms of dress. So he has done a fair amount of study of indigenously created scripts in the Philippines, in West Africa, Southeast Asia, etc. And he says, I have often encountered resistance to their study. He doesn't mean resistance in the community. He means resistance in the academic community. Scripts that have been deliberately devised in recent times have received less attention. Next slide, please. So why would that be? And this is what he says. he has identified 3 common dismissive responses. People say invented scripts, they're not real scripts. In fact, the word often used to describe them is secondary or artificial. Secondly, people say, well, they're rarely successful. And if you think about that, that's a circular argument or a self-fulfilling prophecy. If your attitude towards newly created or indigenously created or locally created scripts is, we don't need to pay attention to them because they're rarely successful, then they're rarely going to be successful, because already the attitude towards them is a dismissive or condescending attitude. And my attitude is very different, as you'll see in a minute. And then this is an interesting third argument, which actually I've heard in India, or from people working in India quite a lot. It says they simply add a distraction to the more important goals of orthography development. And so there are plenty of very well-meaning people whose argument goes, here is a community, they would normally say a tribe, that is illiterate. And of course, I would prefer another term which is not so judgmental, but they'll say they need to have a script. And so we are going to give them a script. And typically the script that they will introduce is a version of the Latin alphabet or the International Phonetic Alphabet, which of course in itself is a version of the Latin alphabet, or a version of the Devanagari script. And so what you have, interestingly enough, is actually kind of the echo of a colonial attitude, which is these people are inferior to us. We are going to improve them by giving them something of ours, because that must be an improvement because we are more civilized or advanced than they are. And obviously, you don't need me to tell you stuff about colonial attitudes as viewed from the viewpoint of the colonized, but it's astonishing to see how often that attitude is still echoed all over the world. You'll still hear that attitude used in Africa a lot, for example. And then in addition to Piers Kelly's discoveries about what people say, I've heard people say, oh, they're just the work of enthusiasts. I'm kind of going, yeah, if you're going to invent an alphabet, you pretty much better be enthusiastic about it, because it's a lot of work. It's several years' work. And then another attitude is, these are just people who are being political and they're troublemakers, which is obviously a very toxic attitude, because what it typically means is, here is a community that used to be submissive, that used to know its place, and now they are claiming more rights, more voice, more self-respect, and we find that threatening. In fact, I know of at least 4 people who created scripts for their culture who have been killed for doing so. Next slide, please. This is just a quote from Southeast Asia, from a villager who's expressing what it's like not to have their own writing. And he's saying, we have been an ignorant people without books, without a king, without a government of our own, subject to other kings and other governments. We've been a nation of slaves, despised and kicked about, trodden underfoot by everybody like dogs. And obviously that is an expression of how terrible it is to be an outsider people, a refugee people. But it's interesting how closely he equates their loss of autonomy and their loss of respect with their loss of a script. Next one. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of scripts here that have been created recently. And just to give you a couple of quotes as to why they were created and why people from that culture and community felt they were that important. So Mundaribani was created, and again, I've talked about generational stuff. The guy who created it began working on it when he was in primary school. It's amazing how often people who create scripts for their community are basically your age. I'm speaking to the students in the audience now, or even younger, teenagers, early 20s. So he created it between the 1950s and the 1980s, and it became popular throughout the Mundari-speaking community. And so here is somebody who is in charge of an organization working in Odisha for the preservation and development of the Mundari language and culture. And here he says, we see many languages die out gradually as successive generations of speakers, again, it's that generational thing, become bilingual and then begin to lose proficiency in their traditional languages. We experience that the Mundari speakers seek to learn more prestigious languages, you know what those are, in order to gain social and economic advantages or to avoid discrimination. So this is something that is, again, it's very toxic. On the one hand, there is this equation between writing and culture and civilization. But the dark side of that is, if you have a people who do not have their own script, that means they are somehow backward or uncivilized. Further down, a number of books have been written in English, Hindi, and other regional scripts, but there is a problem of accurate pronunciation of Mundari, and that is leading to poor acceptance of these literary works by Mundari speakers. So that's another thing that happens, is you start losing your own tradition of writing and your own writers who want to express themselves and express the experience of being in that place at that time are starting to write in a more regional script or even an international script. Next slide, please. This chap concludes, because of this script, we see a ray of hope, not only to keep Mundari language alive, but also for its development. And so this is just one example of a culture where there is a script that's been created and supported in order to save a language that's also in decline. Next slide, please. And here is an example of a document written, an official document written in Mundaribani. Next slide. I recognize we're going over time because we had all those technical difficulties at the beginning, so I'll try and keep things moving here. So Monroe, I've actually met some Monroe people in Bangladesh, which is a very interesting country linguistically, in that, as you heard at the beginning, International Mother Language Day was born out of what at the time was the East Pakistani desire to be able to use their own language and script. But after the Civil War, which ended very bloodily in the early 1970s, and Bangladesh was formed as a country, one of the first things that the government did was to say, you are only a full citizen of Bangladesh if you speak Bengali or Bangla. And so that meant that all of the indigenous peoples who spoke other languages and in some cases had other religions than Islam, essentially became second-class citizens with fewer rights immediately. So one of the indigenous groups in that area, also across the border in Myanmar, are the Monroe. Can you, next slide, please? And an extraordinary thing happened. I knew a little bit about the Monroe. As I say, I had been in Bangladesh, I had met some Monroe people, and I had been involved in some projects to promote the Monroe language and script, as you'll see in a minute. But the extraordinary thing was I got contacted by the nephew of the person who created the Monroe script, Menlay Monroe. And his nephew, Fungbre Monroe, wrote to me, and he wrote a biography of this young man who created this script for his people. And if you go to endangeredalphabets.com and you click on the blog and go down a little bit, you'll find this full story in a blog post called The Missing Monroe. Okay, next slide, please. Menlay Monroe created this script when he was about 17 or 18. Again, very young, very committed. But as is often the case in a disadvantaged or dispossessed people, especially in Southeast Asia and Southern China and Northeastern South Asia, when you have a culture that does not have its own writing and has been dispossessed in other ways, writing becomes part of a renaissance, a cultural renaissance, which is much bigger than just writing itself. And it involves a religion and a form of social organization. And so Menlay Monroe not only created this script, he also created a religion called Krama, and he created social organization for the villages, which is explained here, but I don't need to go into in detail. And then one other remarkable thing about these transformations through the invention of writing is that the person who creates these becomes a charismatic figure and becomes a leader in many respects. And in fact, it's some of these people who have actually been murdered by the local authorities for being too powerful and for giving their dispossessed people too much self-respect. That didn't happen in this case, but what did happen is something that happens in other cases, which is that he disappears. And he says he's going on a pilgrimage to the Himalayas to meditate and to come back with a new and improved religion. And that was 40 years ago. But the Monroe still expect him back. There is this very strong sense that this is the person who transformed our people by bringing us our own writing and this religion and this social organization. And one day he will return. Next slide, please. So this is the alphabet that he created, the Monroe script. This is actually part of a teaching wall chart that we put together for the Monroe people and children in Bangladesh. Next slide. Next slide is one of my carvings. This says mother tongue in Monroe. That is not Bangladesh, as you can probably gather. I don't know that Bangladesh has ever seen that much snow and ice. That is actually where I live, on the shores of Lake Champlain, up in the northeast corner of the United States near Canada. Next slide. And this is what the Endangered Alphabets created for some of the schools in the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh, which is a 6-language children's picture book dictionary. And so this is in one international language, English. You can see frog down the bottom. But the word is also there in Bangla, also known as Bengali. It's there in Monroe, over on the right, Chakma, and Tripura, and Marma, over there, top right, which is a version of the Burmese alphabet, but it's its own language. So as far as I know, this is the first thing of its kind where we're recognizing that any village or community actually probably is multilingual. Many of these communities, the villagers will know several different languages because they are multicultural, multilingual communities. And so again, for someone to come in from the outside and say, we're going to improve your lot by making you all learn one language, completely disrespects the identity and the history and the self-respect of all of those involved. Next slide, please. We're nearly done. I'm actually not going to... Gaurav, can you please just move through these pretty quickly, just a couple of seconds each, because I don't think we want to spend much time going on these. And again, these are slides that you can look at your leisure. Next one. This is a wonderful... see, it says medium of instruction: English, Huruk, and Hindi. So there, Huruk is, of course, an indigenous small-scale language which now has its own self-created script. Next. And this is what I was telling you about with the Red List project, where we're trying to identify every script in the world and find out, which are healthy and which are vulnerable. Next slide, please. And you can skip over this. This is very, very important stuff to me. It is something that I would regard as being further reading or further discussion for you today. Next slide, please. I do want to talk about this very briefly. So I am trying to set up a new script incubator program where when somebody does create a script for their people, we are able to support them and help and bring in the services of professional linguists who can help them make sure that everything works and is consistent, and then people who are experts in digitization who can create fonts and make it keyboard adapted, so that if a community does decide, yes, this is something we want to do, then we're able to give them the kind of support that will make it what will essentially turn a 10-year process into a 6-month process, one hopes. And final slide coming up. Yes, if you're interested in the work that I'm doing, I would love to hear from you. If you go to endangeredalphabets.com, there is a contact link, as you would expect. And I am done. Gaurav, thank you so much indeed for saving the slideshow and presenting it. And I will now turn it back over to you if you have comments or thoughts or questions.
So
Hi,
I would
Tim.
like to request our audience to please raise their hands or text if they have any questions.
So before we start the question answer round, I had just seen Professor Sarabjot Singh Behel. He is our Dean Academic Affairs, and he is a poet of a great merit. He was also among our attendees, and I want to extend a very special warm welcome to you, sir. If you can listen to me, if you are still here in the group.
If he's the Dean of Academic Affairs, he probably has a meeting to go to.
Okay, so with this we begin. We open our question answer round, and our the first hand has been raised by Pitambar Behera. Am I pronouncing your name right, Pitambar?
Yeah, correct. Excuse me for these noises. Hi, team. We are actually developing a script for Sambalpuri language. Sambalpuri language is spoken in the western part of Odisha. Odisha is one of the
Yes.
states of
Yeah.
India.
I
And
actually have
yeah.
on my phone the page open at your language because I'm
Oh,
sort of
cool.
following what you're doing with great interest.
Right. So we have Sambalpuri Bhasha Academy, and I am the research director of that academy. And we have already developed the script for that language, because initially we used to have ODI script for Sambalpuri language. Yeah, so but we felt that the need of that language script. That's why we developed it, and we tried to reach you, but we couldn't, because we did not have a medium through which we can reach out to you. So probably this is the very first time we are having, I mean, face-to-face conversation, and I could got an opportunity to talk to you. So I will be reaching out to you so that
Excellent.
you can, yeah, so that you can help us in different ways.
I would love to. Yes, I would love to
Yeah.
hear from you. Yep. So you can reach me either through endangeredalphabets.com at the contact page. Also, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. You can reach me through there, and I will be more than happy to hear about what you're doing. Great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yes, any more questions? Okay, Pitambar once again, is it? Or Varanjeet? Yes, Varan, please.
It's Varanjit.
Ma'am, can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. And hi, sir. That was a lovely lecture. Thank you for that. And my question is, Sir Claude Lévi-Strauss, the anthropologist, he has argued that writing is a form of appellation, a form of repression. And even Rousseau, like when looking at the binaries of speech and writing, he has favored speech and said that writing is a form of impediment to speech. So how would you counter that?
Yes, there is a thread of anti-writing sentiment, which begins. It's possible that Aristotle said something along those lines, although he may not have been saying exactly what people thought he was saying. Yes, Rousseau, absolutely. So when you are at the cusp, at that particular moment in history, where you have a culture which is strictly an oral culture, and you have the arrival in whatever form of other people who have writing, you are at a very, very interesting point in history. First of all, most peoples on the planet Earth have survived without writing for most of their history. And so to say that they are backward or primitive or somehow missing things can't be true. Otherwise, they wouldn't have survived for tens of thousands of years doing whatever they do. On the other hand, when we look at that encounter between a culture with writing and a culture without writing, it is never an equal encounter. The culture with writing almost invariably has, in the words of the song, lawyers, guns, and money. It has the ability to superimpose its will on the other culture. And so you almost never find yourself in a situation where you have a kind of an even-handed discussion about writing, where somebody says, shall we use this or not? And the balance is equal. And consequently, the debate about the value of writing as opposed to the value of oral tradition is never an equal debate. The people who are making the judgment are invariably the more powerful. I have this saying, which is that, you know the saying, history is written by the winners. So I have an extension of that, which is history is written by the winners in the alphabet of the winners. And so therefore, if you have an encounter between whether it's a missionary organization or an army, or even a commercially successful enterprise and an oral tradition culture, the opinions of the oral tradition culture will not be written down. You will not hear about those. It's an unequal exchange. Having said that, it's really clear that in circumstances where writing was allowed or enabled to spread as a new idea and as a new amenity, it has done so in ways that are quite extraordinary. So I'll give you two examples. And they're both from North America. When in the early 19th century, the Cherokee, whose name was Sequoyah, spent 10 years inventing a syllabary for his people. He did so in the face of the fact that there was widespread belief that writing was a form of witchcraft. And in fact, when he went to the tribal council and said, I've created writing like the Europeans use for our people, he was put on trial for witchcraft. And it was argued that he had simply created some meaningless squiggles, and then he was going to claim some kind of power as a result of it. Actually, what he had done was he had also taught his daughter, Ioka, the script. And so the tribal council did something very clever. They separated the two and they gave them dictation. And then they brought what had been written to the other person and said, you know, what does this say? And when it was clear that this worked, the tribal council immediately sort of threw off centuries of belief, which in itself is a huge thing to do, and said, right, our young men and boys will be taught this script, and then subsequently women and girls as well. And it became so effective as it was so powerful, and its appeal was so obvious that within 10 years, the literacy rate among the Cherokee was higher than it was among the whites living in the same area. It had become, they saw its advantage to such effect that they went from being illiterate to literate at a rate that probably nobody has ever achieved in the history of the planet. Similarly, when James Evans, who was a missionary in Canada, created a syllabary for the Cree and the Ojibwe, particularly the Cree, they were so struck by it. I mean, he would take bark off a birch tree and write on it. He became known as the man who made birch trees talk. He showed them this syllabary. And again, this is an area where there was no coercion. There was no colonial coercion going on. In fact, Evans himself got into considerable trouble with both his church and the Hudson's Bay Company, which was this colonial trading authority, that he was constantly harassed by them for teaching the script of Cree. But within 6 months, and you have to realize this is This is in an area where there are no mechanized forms of transportation whatsoever, and all travel was on foot or by river. Within 6 months, the Cree had taken that script 1,000 miles on foot, so their sense of its value as an intellectual invention was that powerful. So yes, it's always worth asking questions about the introduction of writing to a community that does not use writing, because as I say, it's usually an unequal transaction, and the relationship between the two cultures, that the teachers and the learners, is so rarely equal in terms of power. But that said, it's really clear that when writing is offered as an idea, it spreads, and as an invention and as a social good. I think it's hard to doubt it in the abstract. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, any more questions? Shatrupa. So we have Shatrupa. Shatrupa, please introduce yourself, put your camera on, and you may ask your question, please.
Hello, I'm sorry. Switching on the camera is not an option right now.
Okay.
Because I'm exactly not in a very proper setting. It's not a question, rather it's an appreciation. Thank you for this amazing talk.
Shatrupa, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but please, because your identity is also a very linguistic identity, is
Yes.
a very special one. I would like
Yes.
that you please say that too.
Yes, yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I am Shatarupa Sen. I am I'm a linguist and phonologist in that way, and and my work concentrates on language documentation of Sylheti. And regarding this, I was listening to the talk and the question of Varanjeet, and regarding this, I remember the writing system of Sylheti. So Sylheti already had a writing system in the earlier times, but then there was lots of political issues for which the writing system was not at all in use. And now again, there is an effort to bring the writing system back. So it's my personal experience that my grandparents, the people from my grandparents' generation, they could, when I showed them the script, they could recognize a few of the alphabets. My parents' generation, they never saw it.
Exactly.
They never saw the alphabets. So when I introduced the writings, this alphabet, let's call it alphabet, within my own family domain, which is a very, very predominantly Sylheti L1 speaker. And although they have been always taught that you are not Sylheti speakers, you are Bangla speakers, but internally they maintain the status quo that, okay, although in front of the world we should say that we are Sylheti speakers, but we know that we are in front of the world, we are Bangla speakers, but we know that we are Sylheti speakers. So they maintain the Sylheti language. So I understood that, when you show the script, there is an added enthusiasm or an added element of, what should I say, familiarity that people now really want to know more. They want to learn more. So earlier they were happy with saying that, oh, we are Silati. Now I have seen it within my domain of known people that now that they know they have started recognizing the script, they are more interested. It's kind of very interesting for them to write a few sentences, write each other small notes, and all these things in Silati script. So yes, although writing system is not always necessary, as a lot of linguists have told us, but at least in case of language documentation, to make the people aware of the importance of a particular language, this script actually adds a lot of value. That is
Um,
my personal experience.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because yes, because Sileti is a great example of a number of features of this whole issue of endangerment. Yes, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a fairly successful effort on the part of the Bangladesh government and by Bengali speakers in particular to identify, to say, first of all, Sileti was just a dialect, and the implication being it is somehow inferior. And secondly, that anybody who speaks it is somehow less sophisticated. And this is something that you find all over the world, is this equation between an economically or politically powerful language and script and sophistication and civilization, and then anybody who has a different language or a different script, that's a sign that they are somehow less sophisticated or just outright backward. The other thing that Satarupa talked about, which I think is so interesting, is the generational nature of this, which is a word I've used several times already. One of the remarkable things that's happened in the last 12 years since I started the Endangered Alphabets is that when I was first working on this, it was very common for people in academia, in government, to talk about dying languages or failed scripts. And there was a sense that, a sense of doom, really, but also with it, a sense that nothing could be done about it. In those 12 years, there has been an absolute revolution taking place all over the world at the grassroots level, led often by the youngest or one of the younger generations who are curious about their identity, their history, their family, their roots. And so what we've seen in the new scripts movement, which I've already talked about, and also in the revitalization of traditional scripts, is largely driven by people, I would say, under the age of 30. And their curiosity is something that is making available something which, again, as you said, their parents may never have seen. So the work that I did in the Chittagong Hill Tracts of Bangladesh, for example, with, let's say, Chakma, the kids who were learning Chakma in this mother tongue school that I was helping to support, were taking it home to their parents who had never seen Chakma written. Even if they spoke Chakma. In fact, I met a guy who, middle-aged guy living in Dhaka in Bangladesh, who his father had been a Chakma writer and had a great collection of Chakma manuscripts. And when this guy I met was just a young boy, 5 or 6 years old, the army had come in and killed his father and burnt down their house. And so at a stroke, his connection to his family, his history, and the Chakma script was destroyed. And in fact, now, as a successful middle-aged man, he spoke Chakma as well as Bangla, obviously, and English. but he couldn't read or write the Chakma script. And so any documents that had survived, he would not have been able to read. One final point, you talk about language and script documentation, which is, of course, absolutely vital, and I absolutely applaud you for working on it. One of the other things I'm encouraging is new script creation. So I'm working with a number of people around the world who are calligraphers or writers or artists or type designers who are taking a traditional script or a new script and expressing themselves in that script, whether it be in calligraphy or in type design, and as a result, bringing new energy to the growth of it. There is a tendency in academia to say, okay, we're going to study these documents in that script from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They're important because they're old. And while that's true, I'm a great believer in supporting the new use of new and traditional scripts as part of that whole work of revitalization and bringing energy and creativity and excitement to it. And now I think I need to stop because my voice is beginning to break up. But I am delighted to have had this opportunity, and I would love to hear from any of you, whether you've asked questions or not, and to sort of make this the beginning of a conversation that continues.
Hi, team. I would like to add another one. Would you please help us in providing, Unicode for this particular script? Because we are trying to have the Unicode of this.
Understood. Yes. Yes. Send me a message, and I'll put you in touch with some people.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yes, are there more questions?
As I say, I think I need to stop. My voice is breaking up here.
Okay. So yes. So if you want to, instead of asking questions, if you want to, say thanks, or you want to comment, or you want to give your feedback to Tim, that you can do, because then Tim needs not talk. Yes.
Team actually doesn't need any feedback from us because he's far excellent.
I know, but I am the person who feels that it's always good to have a few words.
It was really mind blowing listening to you, team. For the first time, I think I'm listening to you. Thank you. Thanks a lot for this wonderful talk.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, I would just add a little bit here, and this is related to what Varanjeet asked, that Levi-Strauss and Rousseau said that textualizing is actually it is a violence against the language. So, in fact, everything Tim has given a very comprehensive reply to is. I am just rephrasing it. Like being a teacher, this is what you always do in the classrooms also. So that's what I'm doing. So, so I feel that what Levi-Strauss and Rousseau were doing, this is not in conflict with language or script revitalization or alphabet documentation. These are in consonance. These are in sync. So what they were trying to do was, they said so, and even, Guru Nanak, the first guru and proponent of Sikhism, he also said this in a text, sacred text of Sikhs, that is Asa Diwar. He also talks about textualizing, against textualizing. So that was against the hegemony of the written language over spoken language, particularly because writing itself is a power position. not everyone was in fact allowed to write. If I talk in terms of Indian context, everyone was not allowed to be educated, everyone was not allowed to write. So writing was a privilege of few people, and this is world over. That writing was a privilege of few people. So, I mean, if writing is in the center, then definitely those communities, those people who were unable to write, they are further pushed into the periphery. So, so this was related to this. This was actually raising a concern for the people who were excluded from these mainstream discursive practices. So all these people, be it Levi-Strauss, be it Rousseau, and be it our own the philosopher Shri Guru Nanak, we call him with great reverence here. So they were all talking about this in order to include these minor communities, these lesser known communities into the mainstream. And the work which, like, let's say, Tim is doing, devising scripts for the lesser known languages, this is in fact, I mean, this is an inclusive practices, giving a concrete physical form to these languages, the written form, the textual form. So I feel, I mean, this is not in contradiction to what they said. And further, one more thing which I would like to add is to the popular belief, particularly amongst the students, Gurumukhi itself is a devised script. So it was the second Guru of the Sikh. Guru Angad Dev Ji, and he devised this script, not exactly devised, if I may say, he reformed the current scripts, and Lande and Takri and all these scripts included. Out of those all prevalent scripts in this region, he refined and reformed the script, which is now called as Gurmukhi. And Gurmukhi, the word, with the very word means coming out of the mouth of the Guru. Coming out of the mouth of the Guru. So that spreads a kind of, I would say, myth that probably this was like a new outrightly, but yes, in a way, this was a devised script, in the sense that out of the all those current scripts, then contemporary scripts, he founded this script. And eventually, I mean, you can see, I mean, even those people who say that artificial scripts or the devised scripts, they are not as, they are poor expressions. So in fact, that myth is busted as well there, because you can see that Gurmukhi script actually played a great role in this, a very small community, which we call as Sikhs, in the flourishing of this, in the growth and rise of this community. Gurmukhi has played a very important role. So I just wanted to add these few little things. Yes, thank you.
I'm so glad you said that, because I didn't know that. This is, every time I give a talk like this, I realize how much people know that I don't. So this is very helpful.
Thank you so much, Tim. So do we have any more comments? Okay, so
ma'am, I do have something to say.
okay,
Which is ironic because the question I asked, so like it's ironic in that way, but my name in Punjabi language, it does mean Varun. So Varun, the primordial meaning of my name is alphabets of Punjabi language.
Yeah, this is Varan means alphabet and Jeet means victory. So victory over the text.
Yeah, so which is ironic because the question I asked was like it was very contrary to what my name stands for.
I think
But
it has enlightened you about your own name as well.
it did. And thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Varan. Thank you. Thank you for stimulating a very productive discussion. I think, Jasmine, you can take over and proceed with the rest of the program.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So, after such an amazing session with our guest, Mr. Tim Brookes, thank you so much, sir. It was really amazing. We loved listening you. I would like to call my dear friend Saryu Arora to conclude the event with a vote of thanks. Saryu?
So, good evening, all, and greetings on the International Mother Tongue Day. And here we have reached the end of today's very informative and interactive session. I'm sure that everyone present here has gathered a lot of information about the endangered alphabets. And it has been, this 1 hour session has been a very learning and productive experience for all of us. So I'm Saryu Arora, a student of Department of English, and I, on behalf of the Literary Club, would like to express my deep regards and heartfelt thanks to Mr. Tim Brookes, who has today blessed us with his presence and enlightened us with his words. And if time is money, millions for us. This session, I guess he has dropped various words of wisdom, and I'm pretty sure that everyone present here after this lecture has pledged to do his or her own part in protecting and saving those endangered alphabets. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling weeks and months in advance. And for that matter, we are fortunate and thankful enough to be backed by our visionary and dynamic Vice Chancellor, Dr. Jaspal Singh Sandhu, who has been a guiding light in the conduct of this event. We are also very much thankful to Dr. M.S. Bedi, the Dean Student Welfare, who has provided all the vital support at various stages for the conduct of this event. We are Ujjaljeet and Dr. Sumit Kaur Pahwa, who have joined hands in the conduct of this event, which has embedded seeds in all of us to like know and do our part in protecting the endangered alphabets. My heartfelt thanks also goes to Jasmine, the anchor, and Gaurav, who is the tech head, who without whom this event would have been impossible. But not the least, a big thank you also goes to all the faculty members, students, and all the audience present here who have graced this event.
Okay, thank you so much, Saryu. And Tim, thank you. My special thank you personally from my side. You accepted my invitation, and I'm very sure that my students had a very great learning session with you, and this must have motivated them to further learn in the issues regarding language endangerment, script endangerment, and so on. And I think this kind of work, this kind of awareness was very much needed, and the occasion has also been very, very suitable. Thank you so much that you came over. Thank you so much. I will stay in touch with you in
Wonderful.
future
Thank you.
as well. Yes. Thank you
I
so
would
much.
love it.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks for all of your kind words. And as I say, I mean it. Feel free to get in touch, and I would love to continue the conversations that we've begun today. Take care of yourselves.
Yes, you may leave the meeting now. Gaurav, can we close the meeting at this stage? I mean, is it important for everyone to leave first and then we can leave?
नो नो मैम, आप अपने एंड से मीटिंग एंड कर सकते हो,
Okay.
बस रिकॉर्डिंग स्टॉप करनी। यस मैम।
Okay.